Do you have one of Switzerland's most valuable stamps? Let's explore. Ah, Switzerland, a country known for precision watches, alpine mountains, chocolate. And when it comes to stamps, Switzerland has produced some of the most respected classic issues in all of philately. So which Swiss stamps are the most valuable and what makes them so desirable to collectors? We partnered with Scott Catalogs and pulled the 6 most valuable Swiss stamps, excluding errors and minor varieties. So open your albums, let's look at the top 6, starting from least to most valuable. Starting off the list, we have Scott 14, a 5-rapin orange-brown stamp issued in 1854 with an unused catalogue value of $14,000. And right away, Switzerland is entering this series at a very high level. Now, the stamp features a Sitting Helvetia, and Helvetia is essentially the national personification of Switzerland, kind of like Britannia for Great Britain. Since Switzerland has 4 official languages, or 3 at the time of this issue, Swiss stamps and coins are inscribed with the word Helvetia instead of Switzerland. And yes, there's a bit more to it than that, but it's a clean way to avoid favoring a particular language. And in doing so, it just gives Swiss philately even more elegance. But back to the stamp, the seated Helvetia, the detailed frame, the clean layout, the shield with the famous Swiss cross, it already feels distinctly Swiss. Now, Scott calls out an important detail about these early Swiss issues. Margins matter a lot. In fact, Scott specifically notes that examples with 4 clear margins are rare and command substantial premiums because many examples are cut directly into the frame lines. So when collectors find one with clean spacing all the way around, that becomes a major part of the appeal. And this is something that you'll find throughout Switzerland's classic issues. Next up, we have Scott 13, a 15 centime vermilion stamp issued in 1852 with an unused catalogue value of $18,500. The focus shifts directly to the Swiss coat of arms, the famous white cross on the shield surrounded by this bold vermilion frame. And above it, you'll notice a postal horn, one of the classic symbols of early postal systems. You'll also see at the top of the stamp, Rayon 3. These early Swiss stamps were organized into postal distance zones known as rayons. It reflected how far a letter could travel through the postal system. Generally, the higher the rayon, the further the letter could travel. Here we go. This stamp helps add a bit more context to early Swiss philately. This is Scott 11, with an unused catalogue value of $20,000, an 1852 postal horn with Swiss cross and vermilion frame, Rayon 3. It's the same stamp we just saw, but this time denominated as 15 rapin instead of centime. So yes, this is essentially the same issue serving the same postal purpose, but adapted for the German-speaking regions of Switzerland. And this reflects something really interesting about early Switzerland. During this period, Switzerland was still transitioning to a more unified federal currency and postal system. So these early issues can feel wonderfully layered in different languages and denominations and different regions, all tied together under one growing national identity. Now, we should probably address the big white dove in the room. Many of you are probably asking, where's the Basel Dove? One of the most famous stamps in all of philately. Well, the Basel Dove was actually issued before these federal Swiss stamps during the earlier cantonal period. And since this series follows the main Scott numbering for Switzerland, those earlier canton issues fall outside of today's list. But they're in the catalogue. They actually come up before Switzerland's first federal issues, and that includes the famous Basel Dove. It's one of the most iconic stamps in all of philately, and often considered the first tricolour stamp ever produced. Now, interestingly, even if we did include these early cantonal issues in the ranking, the Basel Dove still wouldn't make the top 6. With an unused catalogue value of $17,500, and there are actually even more valuable cantonal issues beyond that. Still, it is a classic rarity and an absolute beauty.
It's not the rarest on the list, but it's the one I gladly lick. It's my personal pick.
Before we get to the top 3, it's time for my personal pick, The stamp I've chosen that has nothing to do with value and everything to do with why we love stamps. My pick is Scott 249, issued in 1939 for the Swiss National Exposition in Zurich, with a used catalogue value of $7.75. This stamp is essentially Switzerland advertising itself to the world. The dramatic landscape of the deep blue Alps, the glowing mountain peaks, the bold Swiss shield, it almost looks like a vintage Swiss travel poster shrunk down into a stamp form. The scene shown here features a well-known mountain and glacier along the Italian-Swiss border. This stamp was part of a set of 3 stamps advertising the upcoming Swiss National Exhibition in Zurich, a massive national event in 1939 focused on Swiss identity and unity at a time when Europe stood on the edge of World War II. Along with this landscape stamp, the set also featured a parade of Swiss professions and a design representing the spiritual life of Switzerland. So this wasn't just postage, this was Switzerland saying to Europe, and especially Italy and Germany, that we have our own identity, we have our own culture, our own unity. Even Swissair got involved, flying promotional mail flights across Europe to help showcase the exposition internationally, which makes the stamp feel bigger than postage because it was carrying a message in an important time. Now we enter the top 3. This is Scott 4, a 2.5 Rapin black and red stamp issued in 1850 with an unused catalogue value of $52,500. And now we're looking at a stamp belonging to the first issue of Federal Switzerland. The design is gorgeous, and we've already seen this design earlier in the last 2 stamps, but this time it's in 2 colors, and so the beauty really starts to show here. Just the Swiss cross surrounded by bold black ornamentation. Now, Scott identifies this as the without frame around cross issue because earlier versions actually had a frame surrounding the cross, but printers experienced constant alignment problems during production, so eventually the frame was removed entirely. And these stamps without the black outline around the cross are rarer and more valuable, especially the Scott 4 at $52,500. Wow. What's interesting is that Scott 1, 2, 3, and 4 are essentially the same stamp, 2.5 Rapin, but one issued in German and one in French. And then those 2 stamps were issued with and without the black outline around the Swiss cross. Those ones without the outline are rarer and have a higher value, especially the French one. So if you find an 1850 2.5 Rapin Swiss stamp that's in French and does not have a black outline around the cross, you have found a stamp catalogued at $52,500, according to Scott. You can see how interesting Swiss philately can get. Next up, we have Scott 6, an 1850 10 Rapin black and red stamp on yellow paper, $130,000. And yes, this is the value of a used stamp. There actually isn't a listing for an unused example, so I can only assume that means that none are known to exist, or at the very least, none have ever been confirmed. So finding a used example in strong condition commands an enormous premium, as Scott indicates. And we are firmly in the elite stamp price territory with this one. And honestly, you know what? It just looks expensive. But you'll find very similar Swiss stamps like Scott 8 that catalogue for dramatically less. And those do exist unused. So what's the big difference? You want to take a guess? It's the frame around the cross, the outline. This time, the version with the full outline is actually the rare and valuable stamp. So if you ever come across one of these with that complete black frame surrounding the Swiss cross, you may be looking at something extremely important. And there's another fascinating note from Scott. Examples of Scott 6 showing only portions of the frame drop in value dramatically, down to roughly $175 to $900, which is kind of crazy. Hey, the Swiss really appreciate precision details, so you need that full outline to get the high value price tag. A partial outline won't do it. And now, the top spot. This is Scott 9, an 1851 5 Rapin light blue and red stamp with a used catalogue value of $210,000. The reason this stamp rises to the very top is that complete blue frame surrounding the Swiss cross. We now know how important this outline is in Swiss philately. This time it's blue, but Scott brings up a very good point in regards to these stamps. Right after Scott 9 is Scott 10, essentially the same stamp, but without the frame around the cross. And Scott warns collectors to beware of fake frames being added to Scott 10 examples. And that is true with anything in the stamp world where adding something small can make a big difference in value. Over $200,000 for a tiny blue frame around a Swiss cross. And it just shows you how amazing and fascinating philately can be. Now, if you collect Switzerland or you have additional insight into these classic issues, please tell us about it in the comments. We're always learning from each other. So there they are, some of Switzerland's most expensive stamps and one personal pick. Together, they give Switzerland a total take of $445,007.75 in Scott catalogue value, which launches Switzerland all the way into second place on our Scott Value Rankings board, comfortably behind Canada. These are prestigious stamps with a prestigious price. Let's see how long it can hold on to the number 2 spot. And that brings us to the end of this episode, which is brought to you by Scott, the worldwide leader in stamp listings and stamp values. Visit scottstamp.com to explore catalogs, collecting guides, and everything you need for your collecting journey. So do you have one of these stamps? Which country should we do next? Let us know in the comments. As always, thank you for watching and happy exploring.